Quilty is brought to you by
Baby Lock. Baby Lock sewing and long arm machines. From piecing to long arming for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread. Perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Dear Stella. A unique fabric brand with modern style. Fairfield. Together, we can make beautiful things. Hovels Sewing. Cut to the point with Hovels Sewing. Moda. Make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Northcott. Cottons that feel like silk. Omnigrid. Providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Hello, welcome to Quilty. I'm Mary Fons, and this is a fireside chat episode. There are a lot of really wonderful stories in the history of quilt making in America. There are also some myths, and I wanted to go through 5 of them on this episode. Not to scold anyone, not to kill any dreams, but just to sort of give you a little bit of more accurate information, so that when someone says, "Oh, you're a quilter," you can be like, "Yes, I am," and they can say some of these common things that they say that we're going to talk about, and you can be like, actually, it's a very interesting story, but that's actually not true. And you can tell them, and they'll be very impressed by how, knowledgeable you are about your craft. So 5 myths. Okay, we're going to bust them. Number 1, quilts were made in the colonial period. Not true. In colonial America, everyone was hungry. All they wanted to do was survive. Colonial America, we're talking Mayflower, Pilgrims, like early America. Quilt making, as we know it, as this pastime, this beautiful patchwork, these antique quilts that we love, they didn't come till much later, the 1840s, 1850s, when cotton production in this country was exploding. So not really until the Industrial Revolution were people making patchwork quilts like we know them. Colonial period, only the richest women could afford to make quilted coverlets, and they were using chintz and stuff. So that's my quilt geek coming out. I could tell you more about that. But the point is that colonial Americans, like Pilgrims, were not making patchwork quilts. They were sort of scrabbling to get by. So that's something that's not true. The second myth today that I'm going to bust is one that really hurts a lot of people because it's such a cool story and we want it to be true. People believe widely that in the days of the Underground Railroad, women would hang quilt blocks in the window of their house to show that this was safe passage through the Underground Railroad, or that they could be a shelter. And it's totally untrue. There is no evidence. And the quilt historians, the people who have degrees in quilt history have searched and searched for any factual information about this. It just didn't happen. It's a great story, but it's fiction. So if someone says, the Underground Railroad thing, you can be like, and you might not want to break their heart and tell them it's not true. You can let them believe it, but actually it didn't happen. I hope this show isn't super bummer for people. Myth number 3, there's this idea that quilters put a mistake in every quilt because only God is perfect. Okay, I think we all know that you don't have to intentionally put a mistake in your quilt to have it not be perfect. I mean, we make mistakes all the time, and if you look at antique quilts, there are a lot of mistakes in there. They didn't know how to do everything properly. In fact, we're probably more accurate sewers today and quilters than anybody's ever been in history because we have more tools and more technology. So the idea that quilters would intentionally put in a block that was a different color because only God was perfect is ridiculous. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll try to be not so mean. But some of these things, it's like, come on. Number 4, a quilt is sort of better or more authentic if it was made in the past. And this sort of goes into this idea that quilts were, that they'd put a mistake in the quilt or something. A quilt today is every bit as authentic and special and is as important as a quilt that might have been made at the turn of the last century. A quilt that was made in the 1900s, of course, if it's a great quilt, it's beautiful, and they did it all by hand, and that's really special. But your great-grandmother would have given anything for a sewing machine like the Baby Lock that we use on this set. She would have given anything for a rotary cutter. Believe me. So don't think that just because a quilt is old, it's somehow better. A quilt is a great quilt if somebody loves it. So that's the myth. Bust that myth. That's one that's really positive, right? And the fifth myth, is that an antique quilt, like around the turn of the last century, 1900 or 1875, those scrap quilts the myth there is that they were made because fabric was so scarce, and they had to piece together whatever scraps they could find. The truth is that scrap quilts are only possible when there is an abundance of fabric. The Industrial Revolution and the boom of printed cotton in America had everything to do with patchwork quilts and scrap quilts. Women made scrap quilts, for the most part, because they had fabric. In a town in Massachusetts, they would print so much. Fabric went from $5 a yard to 5 cents a yard in the span of about a year. So when women were making scrap quilts and there was this crazy patchwork stuff and all the blocks that were invented, it wasn't because of scarcity, it was because of abundance. And that is so amazing. And it's so cool that our country went through that change and people could make this art. So those are 5 myths that I thought I would boot out of the way, because really they're very affirming. They're very affirming myths. We have a lot of really great history and legacy in this country. If you're a quilter, I say you're part of the coolest legacy in America. And so the more you learn, the more you love this. And we hope you'll come back on Quilty and we'll do some demos and show you how to make these quilts. Thanks.
Quilty is brought to you by
Baby Lock. Baby Lock sewing and long arm machines. From piecing to long arming for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Dear Stella, a unique fabric brand with modern style. Fairfield, together we can make beautiful things. Hovels Sewing, cut to the point with Hovels Sewing. Moda, make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Northcott, cottons that feel like silk. Omnigrid, providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years.